All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Sphere. I'm Carla Treadway, and I have with me the Blendr Boys, Liam DeBoer and Jonathan Harvey. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. Good to see you.
Looking forward to chatting.
You guys are my favorite news outlet. I guess I found Jonathan first doing your riffs in the car, and I was always blown away. Like, how do you memorize all those facts and stuff them into such a short reel? I was very impressed. And then eventually I was so happy to see you guys pair up. How did that happen? Were you guys friends before the show?
No, so first of all, I didn't memorize all that stuff. I did write it because it was before the advent of AI and all these LLMs. Yeah. So I did write all the information, but I was reading off teleprompter, 100%. Like a 10-minute rant, no chance that's sticking. I just
let that one fly.
Solid stream of audio for 10 minutes. That'd have been so legit. Yeah, so how Blendr actually kicked off was, like you were saying, I started speaking out through COVID. I was in the restaurant business, got kneecapped like a lot of other people. And by the third lockdown, I was like, I got to do something about this. So I just started speaking out, got a bit of traction. And then after that sort of not really fizzled, but once things slowed down, I'm like, okay, what do I do here? There's a reasonable following and the country's on fire. So I was like, okay, as an entrepreneur, usually you prioritize money. But then over time, you kind of flip the script a little bit. Money becomes less important and it can become more about impact. So that was kind of the phase I was in. I was like, I really think an independent news outlet would leave the right impact or is what Canada needs. So I went down the line of like, okay, what do I create here? Tried something with like this Mars network thing. Didn't really go where I wanted it to go. Then I shifted into Blendr. So I started Blendr News August 2023, and Liam and I connected October 2023, and started working together in December. So he's been the other half of Blendr, and I wouldn't be here without him for sure. But yeah, that was kind of where we got started. And no, we didn't know each other before. He just reached out, and we just started chatting. I'm glad we grabbed a cup of coffee together because yeah, we've been a dynamic duo since.
Yeah, it's an epic pairing. And you guys are in like the belly of the beast. You're in like the Toronto area, yeah?
Not anymore. So we were, I was down at King of Bathurst through COVID. I think he was in a similar area. Then my wife and I moved to Mississauga, like the Port Credit area for a bit. And then about a year and a half ago, we both moved up to Orangeville. So we're about 45 minutes north of the city. The reason for that, honestly, was that I had a kid. His name's Jackson. I love kids so much, man. I just wish I had him earlier. So we moved a bit north just to get away from all the chaos and have just a little more space and a bit of an easier time raising our kids. Yeah. And then Liam's like, hey, this city's on fire. I'm just going to come up there with you. So here we are.
I can't even imagine being in a city. I grew up in Winnipeg, which is a pretty mellow city. We lived out west. We lived in Nicaragua. Now I live in Kenora, which is this tiny little town, but I don't even live there. We live like a 10-minute boat ride away from there on an island. And I've been out of the city for so long. I feel like I'm immune from the boiling frog scenario. So when I drive into like just Winnipeg, I'm like, oh my God, is this what cities are like? Like all the things that have happened are just really amplified, whether it's like the amount of immigration or the wokeness or the virtue signaling. I'm like, whoa, every time I was just there this weekend, I'm like, what happened? Because my little redneck town, not so much like that. Do you guys a little more separated from that, or are the suburbs kind of the same?
No, they're actually really good here. So that's what we moved to get to, was sort of a population of like 40,000 people. You know your neighbors, everybody's nice. You have a little more space. You know, it is, to be quite honest with you, the immigration is shifting up here now. You're seeing it. What I'm noticing, if I'm being honest, is that they're not new immigrants. They're immigrants that have been here for a long time that are trying to get away from the new immigrants. So you've got like a certain amount of Canadian values or assimilation or commonality. So no problem, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. When I think about going to the city of Toronto, I'm like, you have to hold a gun to my head. There's just no chance.
Yeah. Even in culturally, just talking with the everyday people you meet on the street, completely different experience. I think the breaking point for me in the city was definitely having an entire workplace essentially put me through a struggle session, a Maoist style struggle session. Cancellation is, what we would call it today. But that was enough for me.
I've heard that story, but the listeners might not have. What happened?
I had been working somewhere for about 4 months, just a part-time thing, 1 or 2 shifts a week, nothing too major. So it wasn't a major hit to have this happen. But 4 months went by. I don't tell people in my public life, private life too often about what I do on the social media. If they find it, they find it. That's great. But I don't typically lead with it. And then, so 4 months went by. I didn't have an issue with a single person there. They were constantly asking me to take on more shifts. And so things were good on that front. And then, one of the supervisors who identifies as a queer woman found my social media pages and then started like a group chat with 15 to 20 other employees. Apparently somebody in there threatened to riot if I wasn't fired for hate speech. They started, I was dating one of the managers there at the time, and they started bullying her on shift, pulling her aside, showing her tweets of mine that, are actually harmless. They weren't anything that I wouldn't, feel comfortable defending, but they'd pull her aside. Do you agree with this opinion? And blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I get along great with them, but like, we disagree on some things, but that's fine. And then it got to the point where, that stress got and that pressure became so big that we ended up having to part ways. I had to leave the company. Actually, what's funny, I kind of regret not taking the other choice now, because
no, you don't.
no, it would have been really good. It would have they gave
through
me,
re-education.
well, yeah, pretty much, because they so they launched like an internal corporate wide investigation into this, which was crazy. We all got pulled into like, non-legal depositions and had to give our side of the story. They found at the end of it, they were like, we can't find anything that you did wrong. So, you have the option to work here, or we'll pay you severance and the time off since this is happening. So they gave me that. I ended up taking that option, but the other option was that if I wanted to stay there, they would have put all of the rest of the staff through sensitivity training. So like they would have got re-educated on my behalf, which would have been really funny to weaponize their own institution against them. But yeah, that was enough for me too, because it was 15 to 20. There's probably 150 employees at this place, but it was 15 to 20 people that really caused it. And then everyone else in silence was not only saying that they appreciated and liked my content, but that they thought what was happening there was wrong. But yet nobody had the courage to actually say that. So it was, the vast majority, 80% of people just sat there quietly. And then I had to take the brunt of it. And that was enough for me to be like, all right, the city people are not my crew anymore.
Now, when all this stuff started bubbling up, the social justice stuff, did you immediately recognize it as wrong? Or like, did you have a little bit of that boiling frog for a while? Because I tried it on for a little bit. I tried on wokeness. I had a yoga studio at the time. And when it started erupting, at the studio, we did all kinds of like personal development trainings and like shadow work. And I was like, oh, this is just like that kind of stuff. We're doing like shadow work. Okay, let's try it out. And I went to some like social justice yoga trainings. I was working with different First Nation groups in the community. I embarrassingly found some old social media posts where I had a black square silencing myself for melanated voices for a day. Like I tried it on. And I remember the peak was reading some sort of anti-racism book and watching what was happening. And actually, I actually tried. I tried to be woke. And I remember watching this video of a bunch of Black women talking about white women. And they're like, don't you ask us what's right? Don't you just pretend like nothing's going on? Don't you just change like your opinion and go on like nothing's. And I was watching this like, there's no way around this. Like you're saying there's no solution to any of this. You're not allowed to change it. You're not allowed to apologize. You're not allowed to ask what the right decision is. You're not allowed to ignore it. You're just supposed to feel shame, but you're not allowed to feel shame either or feel sad about I was like, this is not improving anything. And everybody's getting way more racist. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I didn't spend any time in that space. I owned a number of businesses and I had a bunch of employees, and I was like, I'm not letting any of this shit into our inside our doors. I'm like, we're not playing this game. Thing is, I knew a lot of the people that worked for me. I knew them quite well. I'll say the only thing that I did when all the Me Too stuff came out, my only thing was everybody gets high fives now. That was it. I was like, everyone because I was in the restaurant business for a lot of years. A lot of your staff. Yeah, well, it's just like even hugs. Even hugs. Everybody gets a hug. Everybody gets a hug when you're in like your mid-20s. You just say, "Hey, what's up?" After
Yeah.
that, it was just bang. Everyone gets high fives. That was my adjustment because I'm like, we're not playing. I'm with my wife for 20
Yeah.
years. I'm like, I'm not playing this game. So that was the only adjustment I made. But I recognized very, very, very early on. I was like, this is going to Ouroboros. This is going to eat its own tail. And I tell this story. I tell this story pretty frequently when I think about it. There was this tribe in Africa somewhere, and what they did was they celebrated cutting off the heads of people that encroached on their land. So when you encroached on their land, they'd cut your head off, they'd hold it up for the tribe, everybody would cheer. So it was like a trophy, right? So what
Mhm.
happens is over time, people get wise and they stop encroaching on your land. However, the problem is the only way that people would have trophies within this culture were cutting off people's heads. So eventually, they turned on themselves and they started cutting off heads of people within their own tribe so they could have a trophy. They just made up new excuses and new reasons to do so. So that's the exact sort of parable or comparison I like to make when you look at this woke stuff. You kind of go, okay, all they're doing is ostracizing people. All they're doing is canceling people. And the thing is, they're getting more and more reactive to more and more insane shit. They just keep broadening their scope. And then it becomes this sort of victimhood Olympics. I'm like, this is exactly what's going to happen within this group. It may take a while, and it's already going down this path now. But that was what I saw, like, I don't know, probably a year into it. So I never really participated. I just sort of identified that comparison.
Well, it's pretty hard to participate in something that openly identifies you as the enemy.
Fair.
So
That
it's
too.
like, so it's like really like
Mhm.
if you're a quote unquote straight white male that doesn't hate themselves, then what message in this group at all do I have that I could hop onto? Because yeah, I'm undesirable number one in everyone's eyes. That was it for me. Was like I never even thought about these things much. Like it wasn't that my identity was built around me being a man or straight or white. Like I didn't think
Right.
about any of these things, and then you started getting targeted for it, and then you think, all right, well, yeah, I should probably start paying attention to the people that say I'm an oppressor and why and what's going on here. And so that was kind of my immediate thing or reaction to it, was just like literally would just wake up every day thinking, what the hell is going on? And just try to find answers to that question.
Yeah, I mean, to give you a bit of credit there, Carla, in fairness, women were the first protected class. Then you got bumped aside. Then it became racial. Then it became about the
Yeah.
LGBT community, all that other stuff. So you weren't the target at first, but like Liam said, we were kind of always the target. So you had
Yeah.
kind of this window where it kind of sort of made sense.
Yeah. Well, and Liam, I heard you say the other day, and someone called you a colonizer. You're like, I'm Irish. I was
Yeah.
colonized.
Well, I wasn't. And this is my whole point, is like, okay,
Yeah.
my ancestors were colonized by the same people you try to say I'm a part of. So the same, quote unquote oppressors that you identify, my ancestors, in Ireland would have had every same claim that you have over here, but it's just because of the color of my skin. And even if that wasn't the case, like my goal thing isn't that I want all of a sudden that kind of ancestral victimhood and be able to say people now owe me things. It's like, no, you just don't get to say that I'm evil because of this.
Yeah. 100%. And the reason I bring it up is I don't think it was an accident that that all happened right before COVID, that the whole Western population was conditioned into believing, like my friend Natalie says, you don't have rights, you have privileges. We went, going to work was a privilege all of a sudden, which is wild. That's so ridiculous. And that's when we started talking about the hierarchy of privileges. And I think that was all social conditioning, so that we were prepped as our rights slowly got taken away. Like, no, that's a privilege that we can give to you. And the more shame that people felt, the more they were likely to follow the rules. Like, yes, obviously fear played into that. They terrorized everyone as well. But nerding out on the topics that you do you see this too? Is this social conditioning to, follow what the government says?
Yes and no, because I believe these things are happening, but I don't necessarily think there is a like a coordinated unfolding. I think of these things typically more through like a psychological lens. And a good example of it is the whole plot line of Inception, where, they're trying to implant an idea in this guy's head through the dream world. And, in the beginning, they're talking about how do we go about this? Like, what idea do we need to get in there? Because they're trying to convince the guy that he needs to sell his dad's empire that he's inherited. And, okay, we can't just go into his dream and convince and say that, you need to sell your dad's business to XYZ person that's paying them to try to get him to do this. But what we need is something more subtle, something that can evolve, like just a seed that gets planted and grows from there. And so the idea that they planted in his mind in that movie was, you just like, I want to create my own path. Everything from that little seed then grows out to, I should sell my dad's fortune and create my own way. And so they get to that endpoint by planting the initial seed. And so that's how I view a lot of this social justice stuff, which really is just neo-Marxism, is that the seed gets planted, which is viewing the world through oppressors and oppressed, that this is the razor that you see the entire world through. This is how it's going to present itself to you. And then as soon as you accept that, as the world can be neatly divided into privileged people and victims, then everything we've seen from there stems, just like you see that idea grow in something like, say, Inception. And so I don't think it's necessarily a blueprint as to A happens, and as soon as that happens, then B happens, and then we move on and on and on. It's that once that idea, like ideas themselves evolve. And so I think they take hold of people, and then you get to this point where it starts off just saying, hey, we need awareness of this. And then the awareness happens of these oppressed versus oppressor dynamics. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, we need restorative justice, as they say, right? So, okay, well, now we need to put these policies into place. And, well, we're still not getting this dream world of equity that we have said that we're going to work towards. So now we need to actually start censoring the people that disagree with our policies. And then it steamrolls and steamrolls and steamrolls.
100%. I mean, well, and this stuff's not harmless. It's not that it just led to people losing their jobs and cancel culture. Like, the scariest endpoint so far is now seeing like land being taken away and property issues. What do you think the end goal is in that? Do you believe that that is just restorative justice for First Nation groups? Do you think this is like the bigger UN, like, you will own nothing and this is how we're going to do it?
So it's definitely the bigger UN, this is how we're going to do it plan. What they do is they disguise it in virtue signaling and equity and justice. But at the end of the day, it's like, we were talking about this the other day on the podcast. Yuri Bezmenov, the Russian, did a video. He actually did an interview in America in the 80s. And what he was saying was, liberals are the easiest target. And I'm paraphrasing. But he goes, basically, they're useful idiots. You use them to mobilize to get your, whatever your ideology or cause is, in place, because what they think is that they are going to be the ones to get the power. But eventually they just get lined up on the wall and shot like everybody else that pushes back when they think it's their turn to be in power. So it's the same thing you're seeing here. Now, I understand that that sounds a little hyperbolic, but it's just take that idea and shift it. What they're doing is they're using the indigenous to say, hey, this is your land. You can take it. Here's what we're going to pass. Here's the policy. So then sort of shake loose private property rights in Canada. But then they're just going to shift the indigenous aside and say, well, it's your land, but the government's going to manage it for you. Move aside. So for me, I think it's the only path.
Well, and a lot of people organizing in different communities, they're corrupt themselves. So it's not too hard to grease the wheel and create a situation where you can make that possible.
For sure. And I mean, people talk about it now in regards to that of, well, they need clean drinking water and this and that, and that's a real problem. But if you still think that the issue as to why they don't have clean drinking water and reservations are largely plagued by poverty, then like you need to take into account that over the last couple of years, especially since 2015, the amount of spending that has happened on these reserves has skyrocketed.
It's one of our largest federal expenses. It's like the second highest federal expense.
And so you go, hey, if there's, $30 billion plus is, I believe, the number. I haven't looked at it in a while, but is it more?
I think it's more now. I think it's like in the 40s.
Jesus. If there's, $30-40 billion going towards these communities and they don't have clean drinking water, like there's something else going on here than just mismanagement or harmful colonization.
I can give you great examples from here. We built a multi-million-dollar water treatment facility. It was explained pardon me, this is how you need to run and maintain it. Someone needs to run and maintain it. So you can either pay us and we'll keep doing all the work so that you have your clean water, or you guys can do it. Here's exactly what you need to do. Well, they didn't want to pay them. So they said that they would take it on themselves. Nobody did any of the work. And the entire facility basically turned to shit and they don't have clean drinking water. And I remember bringing this up to a friend here and she bit my head off. Just like, so you're saying that these little kids don't deserve clean drinking water? I'm like,
Yeah.
no. I'm saying that just throwing money at the reserve isn't the thing that's going to fix all the problems, or the multi-million-dollar hockey rink that we built here for kids. Brand new Zamboni, hundreds of thousands of dollars for this thing. Built it. They decided they just want to turn it into a bingo hall. They put a wall over the Zamboni. It's a bingo hall now. The Zamboni's never been used. It's sitting behind a wall there. So, and there's such an easy fix for this. Public accounting of how dollars are spent.
Mhm.
Yeah, accountability is not going to happen in the world of politics. But I agree, that'd be great.
It's such
Well,
a
it's
simple
even-
solution.
It's even worse in that sense because our government does have to disclose how they spend money. Anybody can go look at their grants and contributions pages or the foreign aid spending, and you see what these projects are greenlit for each year. We get very in-depth budgets, and you can actually go look and see where this money is going. But as soon as that money gets into the reserves, it's a black hole on that other side because now it's, we don't have any oversight into how they spend the money. So yeah, I think, it's a complete black hole of corruption in that front.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like that wherever the money goes. If it's foreign aid in a lot of places like the Green Slush Fund, it's like once they commit it to a fund, quote unquote, then it's sort of like this, you don't see behind the curtain, right? But the big thing is not the accounting, it's the accountability. It's the fact that we spend $500 billion a year plus from our federal government, continue digging further into debt somehow, which is preposterous. And there's no accountability for the bad actions. But if this were the corporate world, everybody would be fired. So I think that's what you're saying is like, yeah, a little accountability would actually solve these problems. I think a little jail time would help too, if I'm being honest, but I just don't. They're the ones that build the system. They're the ones that are in bed with each other, whether it's corporate or politics. So for me, I'm not sure how we break it down, but I totally agree that is the solution.
I have no idea what the solution for Canada is. I wish I could say it's just vote Conservative. I wish. Clearly that's like the only rational option, but I also don't see them fixing a whole lot of problems either. And they got the media monster against them. I see only like two things to continue putting my energy in. Like obviously I'm going to vote Conservative the next time that we have an election. That's like the only party that makes sense. And two is media. But the problem with media right now is the government boot that's pressing on us and squeezing on us. And I don't know if I'm being hyperbolic when I think about the work that I'm doing or you're doing and wondering, am I going to go to prison for this?
I don't think you're being hyperbolic. I think there's a few more steps before we end up in jail, though, but we're certainly heading down that path. I think there's going to be a lot of warnings. You're going to get cut off your platform. You're going to get given warnings. There's going to be things that'll happen first before you end up in jail. But I mean, you just look at the UK and they're only a few years ahead of us, but we are passing similar legislation. You have C11 and C18. You have the Online News Act and Online Streaming Act that are censoring content, even though some of it's like soft censorship. What I mean by that is if the Online Streaming Act says that X percentage of content has to be Canadian content approved by the government on a platform, that's soft censorship because other content should have been in that space, right? So now with the Online News Act, well, that's literally being censored on Instagram, Facebook, and for good reason. I wouldn't pay our government either. That's preposterous. But then when you look at Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, you look at Bill C-8 and Bill C-9, one can cut off your internet and the other one can stop you from basically offline harms and online harms. So they're building this machine, this apparatus that when you put all these bills together, you are not wrong. It is going to be the most or one of the most potent censorship weapons with punitive penalties in place in the world. Forget the East, in the world. Like I recognize that they're not going to kill us, but you can spend a life in prison if you breach Bill C-63 as it currently stands for online speech. So yeah, we're heading down a very dangerous path. In fact, if that bill passes, I think it would be prudent. I think it would be a good move for people like us to, even though you're harpoons on an island, get out of this country. Unfortunately, that's what we would do.
Well, and two, it's when it comes to totalitarian movements, whether they're left or right leaning, they all follow a similar trajectory. And this is kind of that evolution as to how it unfolds is, we can see this, how it directly played out even in our societies, was from 2010 to 2015. They created safe spaces in universities, which was essentially what they did was they were classifying ideas and opinions as harmful. So that in and of itself brings, or sorry, language and speech into the realm of violence. And then what that also is doing is making you equate violence as a legitimate response to speech that you don't like subconsciously. I'm not saying people are doing this consciously, but then from 2015 to the 2020 era is when we started seeing the cancellations go crazy. So at first we're just not going to associate with you. And then when that didn't work and get people to shut up, then it was, okay, well, we're just going to ruin your life if you disagree with us. And then from 2020 to 2023 era was when you started seeing the censorship starts taking place. So it's not even, oh, you said something we didn't like and we destroyed your life for it. We're not even going to let you say that thing in the first place. And then it became in 2023 to kind of the 2025 era was when you started seeing this make its way into like institutions and become institutionalized in the sense where, you can see with Jordan Peterson, where it's, hey, if you say something we don't like, you're not going to be allowed to even have accreditation at any level in society, whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a nurse, whether this or that. Like, we're just going to make you essentially unable to operate in society. We're going to exile you. And it's important to note that the human psyche equates exile with death. If you were ever on trial in the olden days, they'd often give you the option between exile or death. Socrates is even a famous example of that back in Greece. And he chose death because he knew exile is the same thing. He's like, if no other tribe or group is going to take me in, so if I leave this place, then I'm going to die. And then now they've got into the realm of actual death and violence with, you see in the Charlie Kirk assassination and the fallout from that, they go, oh, now we just like openly accept political violence. So like these are how these things go. And so, yeah, when you sit here and say you're concerned, I think that's correct, because even now, right now, yeah, sure, they go after the thought leaders, the people that are driving the movements, the commentators. But this is kind of the illusion that I see a lot of people fall into, which is that, okay, well, if I just sit down, shut up, and mind my own business, then I won't get anything. And it's like, no, even if you go look back at the Soviet Union or any of those kind of totalitarian states or Maoist China, what you see is terror was the point. So it wasn't just that they were trying to shut you down. They would imprison random people. You would never have done anything before, because what they want is the psychological conditioning of just going, I, for any reason at any point, if I don't follow any given rule, could end up in a labor camp. And that's what they did. And it was largely successful because, yeah, people end up cowering pretty hard. And so to me, it's not even really a question of, whether it'll happen to us, the media personalities, or not. It's eventually that snowball gets large enough that it ends up running over everyone.
It's the hardest thing for people to do, even without the threat of severe consequences, saying what's true or saying what they believe in. That's why like masks were the hardest thing for people to refrain from using, right? Because it was a social shaming thing. I have two friends here who are Christians, and they both work for the federal government in the prison system. And before work, they were made to do these like First Nation water ceremonies and like smudging before work every day. And both of these girls are pretty devout Christians. And I said, that's a spiritual ceremony. And they're like, yeah, but they kind of make us do that. And I'm like, would you force baptism on people like every day before work? Just like dunk them? No. That's not okay. You wouldn't do that to them. They can't force this on you. And I'm super proud of them. They eventually were like, oh yeah, actually, you're right. And this doesn't feel good. And they were able to assert themselves. But that is so hard for people to do when every single coworker is doing it and you're being told by like your employer that like, this is the thing that you're going to do. And, they probably thought that there might have been consequences like getting fired beyond just the social shaming of it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another big thing to consider there. Two. One thing is we learned through COVID that people would actually prefer more to be a part of the crowd than to be correct. Right, which was stark for me. That was very surprising. I was surprised to see how many people in the world were like, I just need to fit in and be a part of the gang, no matter what it means, no matter the sacrifice that I have to make, maybe even my own life. I'd rather be in the gang than ostracized. So that was interesting. That was one thing. So when you see other employees or other people sort of towing the line, it makes sense that a lot of people would do the same. Here's the other thing. We talked about excuse me. We just talked about a number of bills that are enforcing censorship and penalties on Canadians, and it'll just get worse and worse. Totally agree with Liam. But one thing is, we can find a way to work around a lot of that, right? There's ways around a lot of these things, especially as it continues to ramp up. But the one thing you can't really work around is the economic suppression, right? If you got to work until more than halfway through the year for your economic freedom day, your tax freedom day where you can start earning for yourself, more than half of your money is effectively going to the government. That is economic control. They have you by the balls. We have the highest household debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We're in real trouble. If interest rates go up, if anything happens, we have nothing that we can back into as a society. And that's at a macro scale. So you take that into consideration and go, people can't afford to push back. They can't afford to fight, because if they do, then they're fucked, because this is all about economic leverage. That's the one thing. If your government controls you from a financial perspective, all the other stuff is just icing on the cake. It's periphery, because if they've got you by the financial balls, you pretty much have to do whatever you're told, unless you're willing to be a renegade and really make a stand, which many people are not willing to do. Honestly, hey, some of it's for good reason. You got a few kids, you got a mortgage, you got to try to survive. I get it. You were sold a false promise. That's exactly what happened. So a lot of people are doing it because it's the lesser of two evils. A lot of other people just don't have any balls, and that's okay too. It's not my business. But the reality is, they're under economic control. That's really what's going on here.
Yeah, they don't need to kill people. They don't need to jail them. Just
Yes. Unfortunately, that's the system that we're in. And that's why I make the comparisons. Like, you look at Mao's China and you look at how they operated there. I'm of the opinion that you won't see it play out the same here, because I think that there are different control mechanisms in place. And, a good example is democracy. And I'm not trying to shit on democracy and say that every election is rigged. That's not where I'm going with this, but hear me out for a second. In the past, throughout history, governments, kings, whoever was in power, tyrannical or not, they would use violence if necessary. So it was a part of the Overton window, or the zeitgeist, that if you stepped out of line, whoever was in power would use violence against you, rather, to keep you under control. So what that tells the citizens, or the people, or constituents, is that violence is okay. So if enough people in society get pissed off, they'll use violence against the government, overthrow them, and then a new government takes place. That was the way of the world for thousands, hundreds of years. Then they came up with democracy. And again, I'm not saying that all democracy doesn't work. I think it's the best system we have. But anyway, they tell you that, hey, you can vote your way out of this. That's how this works. But what they didn't tell you is that in many cases, they've hijacked the system. You've heard the saying, politicians are two wings of the same bird. Same two puppets, same puppeteer. So this is kind of what you get. They go, well, hey, look, you don't have to use violence because we don't use violence against you. So that's how Mao's China doesn't quite translate, even though the same ideas are there. They go, you can just vote your way out of it. But then you do, and you're not in any better a place, because they've hijacked the actual democracy that's in place. So this is the challenge that our generation has to sort of try to. I don't know how we're going to succeed. I don't know how we're going to get through this, but this is something we have to overcome.
Yeah, I think the two wings of the same bird isn't party specific, but person specific. So like when I look at someone like Doug Ford, I'm like, oh, I don't even think Dougie's a liberal. Dougie's just a nothing. Dougie's just wherever like the money is. I think the party does still matter, because the party chooses policies, and policies affect people. Or at least I'm of the mindset that if all the two wings of the same bird people are correct, then we are so screwed.
Well, okay, let me maybe clarify them for a second. I agree with you that there's differences in party policy, 100%. A lot of it's minor, but a lot of it, sure, you can say is significant. But I'm of the opinion, and you see it right now with Mark Carney, who was the chair of Brookfield Assets. So government is no longer just politics. It's the corporate world connected with politics, and they trade back and forth. You don't have one without the other. You have corporate and political elite running this country. It's essentially an oligarchy of corporate and political elite. That's what this is. So if you get a politician in place, let's take Pierre Poilievre, for example. I like him. I think he would do a great job. But for a minute, let's consider, how did he get there? What money got him in that position? And how much control does he actually have when he's in that position? What can he actually do? Despite what his intentions are and how good he wants to do for the country, what can he actually do? What are his handcuffs like? And how much is the money still ruling the narrative or the situation? And I would suggest that it's pretty significant. I don't think Trudeau was the mastermind behind a lot of his ideas. I think he was implementing a plan. And I think that Pierre Poilievre would do a much better job than Carney or than Trudeau had done, for sure. But I do think his capacity is far more limited than most people understand.
Totally agree. Even when I look at a figure like Trump, who is a total wild card, doesn't really care about what other people think, you can tell that even Trump has cards. The
Exactly.
Epstein files, for example, like he was like there's something happening. There's some sort of strings being pulled on him too. So even a strong character has influences on them that we're unaware of.
Exactly. Exactly. So like you can vote for another party, but essentially there's a certain amount of control that exists over top of your voting rights. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. And I think that scope has continued to broaden.
And to even if you look back like to Aristotle in his philosophies on politics, he drew out a fantastic idea as to how societies operate and where power lies. He essentially said that you can have rule by the one, which would be a monarchy or a king, a dictator, rule by the few, which would be oligarchy, so your elite class, a technocracy, or you have rule by the many, which is democracy and mob rule. And so I don't ever think too that it's just one of those things, that you either have a system where it's, you know, pure kings, pure elites, or pure democracy. It's that it's kind of like a level of influence that's constantly fluctuating between the two. And, you know, as populism starts to rise, you have more power shifting to the democratic mob rule kind of idea. As power starts to centralize into, say, the hands of a single leader, then you've kind of got more of that rule by the one. Or sometimes, as we've seen over the last decade or so, it's listen to the experts. The experts are guiding your policy and all this, and we kind of have this oligarchy kind of technocracy aspect. But yeah, no matter what the time period is in history, no matter where you are, things are that power play between those three modes is constantly shifting, like day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, even to the point where you go back and look at, say, Maoist China, where even he, like Mao, he was a dictator in every sense, a totalitarian leader. But even if you really get into the weeds of it all, he still had to play ball with some of the regional leaders because China's split up into 23 different provinces, and each of those provinces has a lot of power as well. And so it was kind of like there's these constant games at play between. So it's not really just, okay, there's this one person or there's this one group that has all the power. It's really, yeah, a game. It's Game of Thrones.
Who's the biggest threat to Canada right now? Is it Mark Carney? Is it the United States? Is it
I think it's the Liberal Party of Canada as a organization,
Yes.
which is an extension of the Chinese
China.
Communist
Yeah,
Party.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say the two of them are basically in bed, and that's causing the biggest problems for us.
It's terrifying. Like to see Mark Carney talk about like breaking our relationship with the United States and forming a tighter bond with China. Like, do we not need to remind people that they have genocide and slavery and all that kind of stuff over there?
Well, the liberals run the media. So the thing is, they tell you the story they want to tell you, then they do what they want to do. And that's exactly what's happening here. I was just doing a video on it earlier today, actually. The whole Doug Ford thing with putting out the $75 million in anti-tariff ads in the United States, which was preposterous. I called it out over a week ago when it first came up. I'm like, what the hell is this? And I had sort of this theory. I'm like, I think that this is a long play, that Canada knows what they're doing. They're using Ford as a pawn to get deeper into bed with China. And then yesterday it came out, Ford goes, well, yeah, I mean, Carney and his chief of staff knew. They said everything was good. Mission accomplished, bro. Everything's cool. And then Carney had already laid groundwork with China, meeting with one of their premiers, and now he's meeting with Xi Jinping to deepen ties. But what he's able to do is he's able to convince Canadians, because they own the media, they own the propaganda arm, to say, well, hey, we didn't want to do this, but Trump gave us no choice. He said he wouldn't meet with us anymore, even though they're the ones that caused all this shit. And he goes, well, our only choice now is to get into bed with China. And so you get deeper into bed with Beijing, but you make it look like Trump is the adversary and it's his fault. So that's exactly where we are. To your point, it's China and the Liberal Party together.
Well, and just to layer on there as well, actually just a week or two ago, before Doug Ford put out his tariff ad, the Chinese embassy, the Chinese Communist Party, was running that exact same Reagan speech, and they got like 15 million views on their social media with it. And so it's like, this is the exact same messaging. You go look at, Carney's
So bad. I didn't know that.
financial ties to China. You look back a few years ago, and there was a scandal with Doug Ford being found within these, they call them the United Front groups. It's kind of like the
Mm.
United Front is essentially the Chinese Communist Party's version of USAID or Global Affairs Canada, and like their representation in foreign nations. And so Doug Ford was caught in a scandal with the United Front, some United Front groups, like, yeah, just a couple years ago. Same thing. You see this with David Eby. He was giving United Front organizations Canadian taxpayer dollars.
Right.
He gave,
He wants to make an ad now too. He was like, that was a
yeah,
really good idea. I'm going to do that
yeah.
too.
And even look at
He's such an asshat.
yeah, and even look at when the tariffs from Trump started coming in the first place, all around the world, is that you look at the only two countries that put retaliatory tariffs in place, it was China and Canada. And so, yeah, to your point about the historical aspect too, Sam Cooper just released a piece 2 or 3 days ago about in essentially a psyop that the Chinese Communist Party was running under Mao. Actually the guy who created the United Front policy in China, who goes by the name of Zhou Enlai, or not goes by the name of, it's just his name, but
He also goes by it. You're not wrong.
But he had a scholar at the University of British Columbia, a Chinese national, who was running influence operations successfully on Pierre Trudeau and Canadian elites through the Power Corporation. And their whole goal was to get Canada to lose itself out of the American orbit and start having more Chinese Communist Party influence. And it was extremely successful. In 1970, Canada recognized the People's Republic of China. And this is what's really interesting, is this dynamic between China and America, with Canada kind of being like, it's kind of like two divorcing parents trying to weaponize the child against one another. And so what you saw was back in the 1970s, when the fallout, because China had gone through a civil war, you had the nationalists flee to Taiwan, you had the communists take over China, and so there was kind of this split, like, who's the real China? Is it Taiwan or is it mainland under the Communist Party? And Pierre Trudeau formally recognized the People's Republic of China under the Communist Party as a legitimate nation. And they even barred Taiwan from competing in I think it was the 1972 Olympics, from competing under the banner of China. And this caused a rift at the time between America and Canada, because they were like, hey, we have two different foreign policy stances here, because America was on the favor of the nationalists and Taiwan on that argument, and Canada under Trudeau split ways. And so this is the exact same strategy that's been going on for 50, 60 years, and is just continuing to play out.
I think it was James Lindsay that pointed out that Canada had this intentional degrowth strategy since the Pierre Trudeau Elliott days. Like this has been a long-standing plan. And we have all the elbows up Canadians thinking like, well, just buy Canadian and like be sovereign. I'm really trying to be nice here. Trying to be nice with my content lately, but it's really hard to see how stupid people are. When you look at how much of our resources right now go to the United States, like 77% go to our next door neighbor, which makes sense. And yeah, sure, it makes sense to form other relationships for trade. But when you talk about like sovereignty, we're not a sovereign nation. We're going to have to be under the boot of someone because we're set up so poorly, and it's going to take decades to course correct that. Decades. When Mark Carney's like, don't worry, I just struck a deal with Jamaica. Like that's not going to flip it. It's going to take
Cool.
time.
We'll have plantains.
Well,
Awesome.
the choice is, do you want to be under the boot of America, I guess, or under the boot of China? And
the only thing that makes sense is America. I agree with you. It's 100%. Ever since World War II. So after World War II, you'd see a lot of Canadian goods across every sector of the market. We did a lot of our own manufacturing and production. Since then, we've just become a more service-based economy. We're over 90% service-based now. So we, like you said, we're not really a sovereign nation. And, you talk about being tied to the U.S., they talk, we're gonna reallocate our resources. We're gonna move them off to other countries, and they talk about energy primarily. We only have the capacity to divert 22% of the energy we send to America, which is 80% of our oil and gas. So if you do the math on that, There's no chance, and this is today, and it would take 5 to 10 years for us to reroute like 50% of what we're sending to the U.S. So we don't have a choice but to be in bed with them in some capacity, no matter what, no matter what's going on. We actually don't have the infrastructure and the energy
Mhm.
movement structure to offshore this to other places. So it doesn't even make any sense. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to tag on there as well. There's one more key figure before you finish your point of we rely on American refineries as well. Over 90% of our oil is refined in America. So even for us to sell it to other nations or, refine it and barrel it, we can't do that ourselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, it makes zero sense.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
Can't transport electricity. Like,
no.
to transport hydroelectric power, when you actually look at the efficiency of that, by the time it gets anywhere, that it's like 20% efficient to do that. It's insane.
Yeah, effectively, we can't survive on our own. And here's what's happening. Like Liam and I talk about this all the time. So global GDP is sort of shrinking. Now you have the advent of AI, which may spike it. But if you look at it as like a GDP per capita and you look at the sort of declining population in the West, like globalization is not what it once was. We're going through a phase of detraction and it's going to continue. So when you think about that, what's actually going to happen is the world's going to break off into these different sectors, right?
Mhm.
And if you think about this 10, 20 years down the road, which is I think how we should be considering these, the best alliance we can make is to make a North American alliance. That's what makes the most sense.
100%.
We have all the resources we need. We have a strong economy. We have the same or very, very similar values. That's the path that makes sense. Trying
Mhm.
to continue managing or maintaining this globalization and this sort of world economic strategy, it's a fool's game. You're blowing hot air into the bubble that's going to burst anyway, but they're trying to convince us that's the right thing to do, even though it's not. So love him or hate him, Trump's actually moving down the right path, and we should be much deeper into bed with America. It makes sense in almost every way, unless you ask the media or the liberal politicians of Canada.
Well, I think it's so dangerous what we're doing to Canadians, terrifying them, using Trump as like the big bad enemy for a multitude of reasons. One, all of our problems happened before Trump. Trump is not
Yes.
responsible for us being at the bottom of the G7. He's not responsible for our immigration crisis, our housing crisis, our healthcare crisis. We did that to ourselves, but it's the only card that the liberals have to play. And my concern is they will do whatever it takes to win another upcoming election, but they're going to burn our bridges with the United States. Is what Trump's like, do the tariffs hurt Canada? Sure, but I think he's just doing what's best for his country. We should be doing more of those things, what's actually best for us. And economics is one thing. What about war? I'm not confident to link arms with like the UK. The UK is doing terrible. I don't want to be attached to the European Union. I want to be with Big Brother US. If things are actually going down, you want military power.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even just yesterday, I made a video about this whole saga going on between America and China and Canada right now, and I saw a hilarious comment from like your just typical CBC viewer, 60-year-old boomer. Just, yeah, well, Trump's a bully, so maybe we should just go with this China with China instead. I look at that and go,
So
how
short-sighted.
clueless do you have to be? Like, look, even if you don't like them,
Yeah.
you share a border with the largest empire in human history, the greatest military power to ever exist, and you're gonna say, yeah, screw them, let's go up against them, when by every metric our own government admits that our entire military is falling apart and doesn't even have enough ammunition to go for like a week of war. And so
We
just
got
this
one
idea,
submarine, just one,
yeah.
and it's
And
broken.
look, and hey, even that you had this idea where you go, okay,
Yeah.
we want to split ways. Well, you have to at least make sure you're in a position to do that. And
Mhm.
that goes exactly to what you were saying about our problems existing long before Trump. And this is what I said is like, look, the aspect of how this one man can make decisions that throws our entire nation into peril is our fault, because we were in a
Yes.
position where we left ourselves extremely vulnerable. If we
Mhm.
weren't going through this degrowth process, as you aptly pointed out, for the last 50 years, in scaling back our industry and
Mhm.
economics and even just our natural resources and all our leverage and dismantling our military, then we wouldn't have been in a position where one man could just push us around. And so you have to take, it's like, getting beat up at the bar or having a jock talk shit to you. It's like, yeah, maybe that guy shares some of the blame, but also like you should be able to defend yourself. You shouldn't just be like have to be in a
Uh-huh.
position where you cower and hold me back. But it's like
Yeah.
that's the position that we're in. That's what our leaders have been choosing for the last 50 years.
And he's not going to be there forever. Trump's
No.
not going to be in charge forever. We're going to break those ties. That's
Yeah,
insane.
exactly.
So here's a unique problem or something to think about or something that I think people like us need to strategize around. I can't say like the solution is just voting conservative. That's not it. We're doing everything that we can with media to highlight like the things that mainstream media won't cover. That's important. But there's a third thing that has to happen, and very few people are doing it, especially if they have a platform and a voice. Censorship is like my most pressing concern. Like this is like the tool that we have to fight against all of this. And there are so many people in this movement that are shooting themselves in the foot. What I mean is, after everything that's like been done to us, people are angry. They're angry and they're really scared. And this happens more on places like X. I hear you guys making content that's really like rational and reasonable, and you're not shying away from any of the issues. You talk about any of the stuff. But what I see are more and more people actually moving to the far right, or actually becoming racist, or like just becoming totally unhinged in this space. They're not filtering what they say at all. And this isn't about self-censorship. This is like just being strategic with the things that you're talking about. I don't know if you guys are seeing this too, but I see it on X all the time now. People with great big platforms that are like some of the stuff that they're pumping out, like instead of just rationally talking about immigration, they're actually putting out like severely racist content. And I'm like, look, you're not helping things. If you're going to keep doing this, and I understand like the anger and I understand the pushback, you're going to make this stuff materialize faster. I get it. It's super hard to have like a level head right now, but I don't know. I think that's what we need to do as creators right now. Make sure that the information that we're presenting is factual. I think it's important to present like lots of options, but there's a lot of people that are encouraging the censorship monster with their behavior. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's what I would say. The majority of those people are fitting into a category that I would suggest are just looking for attention. So when you're in the news, when you're in like the news media space, independent media, there's three primary ways that you get attention. One is being first to market. I've got the information before anybody else. I'm the ticker. Okay. The second one is being sensational, right? And the thing is, when you're used to getting attention, if information is no longer sensational enough, you continue to become more and more sensational. You get crazier and crazier to continue getting attention. The third way is by actually sharing rational thoughts, by stitching ideas together and trying to explain to people what's really going on. It's having a solid perspective. That's the hardest one, but in my opinion, that's the best one. So what's actually happening here is a lot of people, because think about it, the price of entry here is just show up, have a microphone, and talk shit. That's really what this is, right? Most of us don't have a formal education in this space and don't have formal experience. We just started talking because we're like, this is insane. And I'm glad that we do it. But a lot of people in this space don't necessarily have the skill set to share these perspectives. So what do? They focus on 1 and 2. They try to be first to market and they're sensational. So that's actually what's going on. In my opinion, for the most part, people are doing this shit for the clicks and thinking about themselves and not actually the cause, right? So they're just as bad as people that are on the extreme left. To me, it's really one and the same. That's exactly what it is. And I hope that they do start paying attention, because the thing is, I was saying earlier, this becomes less about economics and more about impact, right? As sort of the script flips over time. But these people that are doing this, they're only worried about themselves, not worried about the larger macro impact, or they wouldn't be saying stupid shit like that. Because the reality is, it's not coming from a place of logic. It's coming from a place of emotion. They're dropping down from the logical part of their mind. They're living this emotional state, which allows them to get carried away and say these insane or stupid things because they want attention. That, in my opinion, consumes the majority of the problem we have that you just discussed.
Well, and I think too, what ends up happening is you call somebody something for 10 years, you tell people that they have all these implicit biases and they're inherently racist and there's nothing you can do to get away from this.
Yeah.
At a certain point, if no matter how the person changes their opinions, you saw this for 5-10 years. Everybody was like, I won't even say anything about immigration policy because I'm not racist. And so they went along with this. But if they still kept calling them racist, even after they tried everything they could possibly do to not be racist.
Yeah.
If you do that, then there's inevitably going to be a portion of the population that just says, screw it. All right, I'll be what you want me to be. I'll be the monster. And so, like, to me, I look at that as a reaction. I mean, hell, even in left-wing lexicon, throughout the decades, this is what the Marxists would constantly call right-wing people, is reactionaries. It's that they have a way of, they're moving to a certain place, and anyone who opposes us is just reacting to us. And so they're creating this own reaction. It's a inevitable outflow of their own actions. And now I think the real challenge in that is to not become the monster as they try to, because I've even seen it in my personal life, and it's one of my favorite things when I can see that somebody knows me for 2 or 3 months, sees how I interact with them, let's say every day that I see them, hey, how are you doing? Like, actually try to have a personal connection with them. I try to make sure that day to day I'm never being the one that's, ramping people up anger wise, even if it's not about this stuff. I'm just like, all right, let's try to all just have a good time. But then I can see that when they see my social media, they kind of come face to face, like, say, a lot of these left-wing social justice types, is because they go, I've known this guy for months and we've actually gotten along really well. And then, I see the social media and it's nothing, it does not resemble this archetype that I've made up in my mind as to what my political opponents believe or who they are. And so I love shattering that paradigm for them. And that's what you actually have to do, because otherwise, if they say, which I believe falsely, which they, claim that anyone who's even remotely right wing is, a racist, reactionary, and all this kind of stuff, then it's like you have to, this is actually a very Christian ethic as well, of being like, you have to turn the other cheek. You have to put yourself into a position where you can't be hit. And it's the Barbara Streisand, Jordan Peterson effect, where if you aren't that actual monster that they claim you are, when people go look at you, they go, oh, actually, this person's making a lot of sense. And then you can actually be extremely effective at kind of breaking that mold for people. But yeah, if you become that monster, then you're just playing into their game.
Well, like you say, you're in conflict. You're not in communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, boys, I just really appreciate what you're doing. I think you're doing it really, really well, and not everybody does. I can tell that you're in it for the greater good, and not just let's get famous on YouTube and piss people off. And I think we need more people in that space. And you're right, like, how we are being is just as important as the information that we are communicating, because the truth is, like, we're at war in Canada, and this is one of, like, the tools that we have, and I think we need to use it strategically. And I think you guys are doing a really good job of just putting more thought into the content that you put out there, so we can actually create the change.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for your time here today, guys. How can people find your YouTube channel, your newsletter? Where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so you can find our newsletter at blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com. We send that out Monday to Friday. It's pretty good. Our headline stories are always typically to do with Canada, but then we also dive into other stuff going on around the globe. Then also you can find us on social media. I'm Liam Out Loud on most platforms. It's Jonathan Harvey. And then Blendr News is, the organization for our socials.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time here today.
Thanks,
Thank
Carla.
you. Talk soon.